All right, Drew, thanks so much for doing this Q&A session with us right after your presentation downstairs. We have some folks in the audience, and we're going to hand out the microphone to them to get some questions, because some of them probably want to go a bit more in depth. So let's start with the first question, which is always harder because someone needs to break the ice, but just stay calm. The camera is on us, not on you. So please shoot.
Yeah, so first, thanks for the presentation. It was really awesome. My question is, what are your plans and what's the future of DBDB?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for coming to the talk. I made this joke in the presentation. I do think it was like a Picasso quote where he says, "Art is never finished, only abandoned." And at some point, I do want to leave it alone and just like let it be done. And I think I'm getting pretty close. What I would say is it's cool to have something like this that I can return back to after 6 months or a year if there's something new in the data space and I want to better understand how it works. I have this kind of playground where I can explore new ideas, new ways of processing data. So for right now, it's on the internet. I have a website. It's drewbanin.com, which is where I host my projects like this. So I think the very last thing I want to do is host it at drewbanin.com instead of where it lives right now. But yeah, a couple things. I don't know when I would get to this, but I like the idea of trying to make it like parallelized, the database. So kind of like Amazon Redshift, if anyone's familiar, this kind of clustered model. So I'd like to at some point do something like that, and again, run it on a bunch of Raspberry Pis. I think that'd be really fun.
Do you also plan for companies to put it into...
Yeah.
Do you also plan to make it available for production, I don't know, using it in place of MongoDB or stuff like that?
Yeah. No, definitely not. And building a real database that runs in production reliably is just orders of magnitude harder than what I've done. Yep. So I think of this thing as it's like a learning tool for me, and hopefully it can be a teaching tool where I can teach others about, not an academic understanding of how databases work, but a deeper intuition of why some things are fast and why some things are slow, and how to be really good at writing SQL using this knowledge of databases. So purely a teaching and learning tool.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Any other questions? Until folks in the audience think of... Oh, yeah. Did we have a question there? Until folks in the audience think of more questions, how do you kind of like balance the like serious work with this like hobby work that kind of like puts a show light on the work?
Well, it's really funny because I work from home and I have a work laptop that I use, and so I'm writing Python code. And at the end of the day, I close my laptop and do a deep sigh, open my personal laptop and start writing Python code. But it's funny, it exercises different parts of your brain, and how do you find the time? It comes in waves, I think I would say. And so I didn't touch this thing for 6 months before a couple weeks ago. And it's like when the moment's right and you're inspired, and honestly, if I had a deadline to be ready to present it here, so that gave me a lot of energy to work on it. But I find that I can't do this stuff every night after work or every weekend. But when I feel that spark, and I want to go build something, it's nice to have a place to go, release some of that energy.
Any other interesting ideas within kind of like the same area of nice ideas that you do enjoy to like work after the serious work?
Oh, well, I mean, I'll just tell you, I love cooking. It's probably my go-to activity. But on computers, this has really been the main thing I've worked on for a while. And I will say, like, I love the idea of writing code that plays music, because I would love to be able to play music myself. I've tried. It is not one of my skills. And so the idea that you could, write programs that generate music is super interesting to me. So I've built a bunch of stuff like this over the years where it's, it's visual and interesting, and there's audio components to it. So every, couple of years I have an idea for a new one and try to build it in a weekend.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, I'll also say, if folks have questions about DBT Labs and the startup journey and anything like that, I'd love to answer those types of questions too.
Yeah, that was my next question. If no one wants to answer, if no one wants to question, uh, what are you doing at DBT?
Ah, so we make open core data transformation software. So open core means that there's an open source component that we give away to everyone for free, and there's also a commercial component that we sell to small, medium, and very big companies. When I say data transformation, the idea is that companies or organizations in general have tons of data coming from tons and tons of different places. So that could be production databases, it could be, Salesforce, or do you know what an ERP is?
ERP. I know the.
Yeah. Oh, I don't mean to
like
put you on the
the-
spot. It would be a
What do you
blessing if
call
you
it?
don't know what an ERP is.
I know the
Enterprise
term.
resource planning
Yeah,
tools.
yeah, I
One of
know
those
that,
boring
but
tools with many windows and buttons.
I have no idea what they do.
No, it's okay. So anyway, it's just like when you go and talk to big companies, they have these ERP tools that manage like inventory and processes and finances and everything about the business. And so my point is just you have lots of data coming from lots and lots of places. And DBT is a tool that helps you kind of combine data from these different sources together, create clean data sets that are ready for analysis. I'll say at a very high level, well, there are many ways to do this. You can write Python code. You could just write SQL directly. DBT is a sort of framework for doing this. We think of it as like Ruby on Rails, but for data. So it's like an opinionated framework, but if you use it, you get a lot of good stuff for free. And so part of that is data quality checks. So we can tell you if there are issues with your data before your, CEO finds out because the dashboard looks funny. We can alert you. And we do a lot more beyond that to help businesses leverage data and know what data sets exist.
Okay, nice.
Thank you.
Cool. Let's try to get another question. Yes.
Have you ever thought about adding something like a real-time component to the database that you work on, or to the whole playing music, maybe adding a real-time component like, I don't know, pitching a string and making the correspondent sound through the database in the project?
Oh, when you say a string, like
I mean,
like a real life,
No, like
violin string, or-
maybe pressing a key and the corresponding key would be
Oh.
transferred in a sequence that can be
Yeah.
interpreted through the database.
I'd like to figure out some way to make it more interactive, where you don't have to like write down a bunch of notes in a Google Sheet and then play the whole thing. If it could like loop somehow, and maybe in the website itself, if you could like enter data directly, something like that would be cool. And I like the idea of, for myself, finding ways to be musical without being talented, just for me. But for people who use it, if there's, these things just feel really cool when it's like looping and you're playing notes, and if you do it right with the right chords and the right scales, it'll just sound good no matter what you do. So I've found things like this on the internet, and those are the things that inspired me to build, this kind of thing. So I'd like to play around with that. It's a cool idea.
Nice. Let's hear a question here in front.
For DBT idea, it was an Africa moment, or it was a process? How was the story behind
DBT? So we started the company in 2016, and DBT existed for maybe 3 or 4 months before the formation of our company. So maybe the shorter version of the story is that we used to work at a different company where I met my co-founders, based in Philadelphia, where I'm from, and it was like an all-in-one business intelligence tool. So they would centralize data from all these different sources that we talked about. They would apply transformations to the data, so to define metrics like annual recurring revenue or churn rate, and then they would chart your metrics and make dashboards that you could share. So that was RJ Metrics. And they were very popular until they weren't, as happens in technology sometimes. And it was the result of a paradigm shift, which was the rise of the cloud data warehouse. So I talked about DBDB as a columnar database, and when we talk about cloud data warehouse, it means like really big, really powerful columnar databases. And this one was called the Amazon Redshift. It came out in 2014. It got, I think, really popular starting in 2016. And what happened was RJ Metrics this company we're working at, tried to do a lot of different things. It was loading data from all these different sources. It was applying your transformations. It was visualizing and sharing. And Redshift was better at processing data than RJ Metrics was. And then this ecosystem of tools cropped up. So there were dedicated tools for extracting data from your sources and loading them into Redshift. And then dedicated BI tools that were really good at charting and could do things that RJ Metrics couldn't. So we called this the best of breed because you use a bunch of different tools that all work together. Long story short is the market for RJ Metrics kind of eroded. But towards the end of the company's lifetime, we saw the need for this new way of assembling different data tools together. So RJ Metrics started building a dedicated extract and load tool that they wanted to sell in the market. And it's really funny. Like, there's this term, the innovator's dilemma. And the point is that it's very hard to build new products that compete against your existing products. So RJ Metrics at once was saying, use the RJ Metrics product. It's all in one. It does everything for you. It's really easy. On a separate page on the website, they said, introducing RJ Metrics Pipeline, part of the best of breed solution that gives you the best performance and cost. And they were competitive, right? It's like old school, new school. Anyway, sorry, I got kind of off track here, but they were building this data loader, basically, to load data into Redshift. We identified that there was no one building the data transformation piece of the puzzle. And so we set out to do that at RJ Metrics. Maybe 3 months into it, the company was acquired, RJ Metrics, and we spun off a new company. We were called Fishtown Analytics originally, because Fishtown is the neighborhood in Philadelphia where we started it. But we were able to take DBT with us because it was open source. And so we kind of built the company to build DBT.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. We have a question there in the back.
Have you ever tried to generate voices and go deeply into generating and filtering voices, not only instrumentals or drums or sort of signals?
Yeah, it's a cool question. We were talking about this when we were stuck in the elevator, actually. So I love the idea of learning more about the audio engineering piece of this stuff. So, I play pure sine waves, but if you assemble the right sine waves in the right way, you can make any sound. And so I think the idea of being able to speak text from sine waves is a really cool concept. I know nothing about how that would actually work, but it's something I'd love to learn about, and it'd be a cool thing to try to add to the database. And I really want to add drums. So that's what I was trying to do last week. I didn't get to it in time. But it turns out, a drum beat it's a sine wave and it kind of decays, and there's something called an envelope around that I don't understand. Okay, I would love to learn more about it. Yeah.
So you plan to study music theory further?
Maybe after DBT labs, I'll go back to school and be a musician.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The lady on the back.
I came in late, and I was wondering if you mentioned what kind of people are you looking for in Cluj?
Sure, yeah. We are hiring, I think, 1 engineering manager and about 5 software engineers. I'll tell you, I'm actually more in the product management world, so I'm not going to be directly hiring these folks, but I'm very excited to meet people and talk about what we do at DBT. So these are going to be, I think it's 1 team for right now that we're going to stand up, and it's focused on what we call DBT's adapters. So this is how DBT talks to the different databases that we work with. That involves generating SQL that runs as performantly as possible, and with the best coverage of the database's features. And it's also how a big part of it is interfacing with DBT. So every time we want to build a new feature, we have to figure out how to run that on Redshift and BigQuery and Databricks and so on. So it's right in the middle of the core functionality, and then also a lot of depth on these different data platforms too.
So I imagine it's going to be quite technical.
Yeah, and in fact, I would say it's probably the place where knowledge of data and analytics is most helpful. I don't think I would say it's a hard requirement for the role, and we can maybe talk more after if you're interested. But it's someone who either needs to already know about this stuff or is very eager to learn about how do these data warehouses work and how to get the most out of them.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and we had another question there.
At the end, I think you mentioned something about how your interest shifted
Yeah.
from since you were 21 to when you got into your 30s. Have you always thought about working with databases on a long term, or did you always have the passion to work with databases?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know why. Well, actually, there's this term. It's called nominative determinism, and it's the idea that your name will dictate what happens in your life. And so my initials being DB, I think, predisposed me to love databases. It's my best guess as to why. So there's a book called Freakonomics, and can we riff? Can I riff? Is that okay?
Of course, of
We're
course.
gonna riff. There's a book called Freakonomics. It's cool. It's an economist that wrote it, or two economists, and they did this profile of two children. The parents named one winner, and they named the other one loser. Later, winner was arrested and was spending decades in jail for some crime. Loser went by the name Lou and was the police chief. And so they talked about nominative determinism in that chapter. Why do I like databases? Databases are really cool to me because there's this performance challenge. It's like, it makes me think about Formula One, right? Like, you want to get the most out of this machine. You have to think about the hardware you're running on, how to optimize for that hardware, the network, you can't have bottlenecks in the network. And then you have to think about the software that you write and how you parallelize things, and you're just trying to eke out like the best performance you can from this machine. And so it makes me think about like race cars or rocket ships or things like that. But at the same time, the excellent databases that are very successful have the best user experiences. And not user experience like you would see on a website per se, but user experience for doing data analytics. So the easiest to use functions or the clearest error messages or things like that. That's like the user experience of the thing. And so I think it's rare to see, all the machines built for performance, like they're bare bones. There's nothing in a Formula One car that doesn't need to be there. But a database, people complain if the error messages are too confusing, So it takes all these hard parts of computer science and makes them all very important at the same time. And that's always been like captivating and thrilling for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have one last question?
Thank you. What's driving you to create, let's say, open source projects or hobby projects? You said you want to make this, you want to help people learn about databases. How do you see specifically this project helping people learn more about databases?
It's a great question. I would say on the open source front, I think these two concepts are very related, and it's very like poignant of you to call that out. On the open source front, open source software is really powerful. And I was in a conference in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, and I met a couple analysts at a company in Brazil, and they have zero budget for what they're doing. But they were able to use DBT and assemble like a zero cost, data platform for themselves. And they were talking about all the things that they learned about their business and how they can kind of optimize things going forwards, using DBT plus other tools. And so like that's really powerful to have reached, globally with software. I'll also say people identify with the open source software that they use. So when you buy a product, it's like, I paid for this. But when you use open source, it's like, you're a part of the community. Like, it belongs to you if you want to engage with it. And so I've just talked to a lot of folks who, in their LinkedIn tagline, it says, what do you do? And it's like, DBT. It's like, that's awesome. Okay, so I've always loved the idea of enabling and empowering people. Open source is a really big part of that. And on the, shifting to the database that I built, DBDB, I can think of a couple different people on the internet that I've learned an incredible amount from. So honestly, Khan Academy, is that popular here? Okay, I would have failed linear algebra in college if not for Khan Academy. And it was like free, online. How cool is that? And another one that's really good if you're into like computer engineering and hardware, this guy's name is Ben Eater. Do you know him? Okay. You know him too?
With the
breadboards, yeah. So he builds computers like with wires on a breadboard, and it's like a 20-part series at this point. His videos in particular are what made me want to start building DBDB. Because it was like, I want to do this for other people who are analysts and care about data. So I aspire to be Ben Eater. That'd be really cool. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Drew, thank you so much for joining us at Exylvania and also for doing this session. And yeah, looking forward to you guys opening an office here and kind of like being a contributor in the local ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.